Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into the life and work of Barbara Gittings. She was a truly pivotal figure, a groundbreaker, whose activism back in the 50s and 60s was just fundamental for the LGBTQ rights movement.
Absolutely fundamental. We'll be looking at biographical info, mainly to understand her role. And it was, well, an incredibly hostile time legally and socially.
It really was. And, the level of risk she took being openly involved in advocacy then, it's hard to overstate. We're talking about a period where homosexuality was widely seen as a mental illness, often even criminalized.
Yeah, her visibility, her willingness to speak out, these were really profound acts of courage.
Exactly. So for you listening, the goal here is to really appreciate that foundational bravery, the sheer persistence of people like Barbara Gittings. Her story gives such critical insight into how today's rights and visibility were fought for, often against just, well, overwhelming odds.
So who was she? This woman who dared to push back so hard.
Right. Barbara Gittings, born in Vienna in 1932. She became aware of her own same-sex attraction pretty early on, but found basically zero positive information out there. And that lack really fueled her lifelong mission, to tear down what she called the shroud of invisibility around homosexuality.
Which was so wrongly tied to ideas of crime and mental illness back then. That phrase, shroud of invisibility, it's really striking, isn't it?
It is. It perfectly captures the deliberate silencing, the erasure of LGBTQ lives that caused so much isolation and fear.
And Gittings felt that lack of positive reflection herself, didn't she?
Oh, definitely. She had negative experiences in school related to her, quote, homosexual inclinations, and then trying to find answers in libraries. Just deeply frustrating.
Right.
She actually said, and this is powerful, my mission was not to get a general education, but to find out about myself and what my life would be like. So I stopped going to classes and started going to the library. There were no organizations to turn to in those days. Only libraries were safe, although the information contained was dismal.
That really drives home the isolation, the lack of resources. It tells you so much about the environment she was trying to navigate.
It does. I mean, the very places meant for knowledge were either silent or reinforcing negative stereotypes.
So people like Gittings had to become their own researchers, their own advocates in this really hostile setting.
And speaking of hostile environments, there's that anecdote about her father and the book, The Well of Loneliness.
Ah, yes, the lesbian novel.
His reaction, he told her to burn it. Just burn it.
Which just perfectly encapsulates the intense societal fear, disapproval at the time.
It really does. Okay, so let's dive into her activism, which really kicked off in the 50s and 60s. Her involvement with the Daughters of Bilitis, DOB, that was a huge step.
Yes, DOB was one of the very first homophile groups, as they were called then, advocating for rights and acceptance.
And how did she get involved?
Well, she connected with Donald Webster Corey, who suggested she visit One, Inc., out in California. And that's where she met Phyllis Lyon and Del Martin.
The founders of DOB.
Exactly. They'd started it in San Francisco.
And apparently, even at her first meeting, Gittings was questioning things, like the name Daughters of Bilitis. Found it a bit obscure, impractical.
Yeah, that sounds like her. Even early on, understanding the need for clarity, for accessibility.
But her big move was starting the New York chapter in 1958. She put a notice in the Mattachine Society newsletter.
Another early group.
Right. And fewer than a dozen women responded, which seems tiny now, but...
But it was a start.
Yeah.
And she became the chapter's first president, serving for, 3 years?
Until 61, yeah.
Yeah.
What does that tell you, her taking that step when just identifying could be so dangerous?
It says so much about her leadership, her drive. That need for community to break the silence must have just outweighed the fear.
It must have. She recalled later, I joined the movement in 1958 when the subject of homosexuality was still shrouded in complete silence.
Complete silence.
There were no radio talk shows or TV documentaries. In all the United States, there were maybe half dozen groups, 200 people active in all.
200 people. It just highlights the isolation, the sheer bravery it took to even find each other, let alone organize.
It's a stark reminder, really, of how recent this fight is and the courage required just to connect.
So the early DOB meetings, they were mainly social alternatives to bars, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bars were risky, police raids.
Very risky. So DOB was cautious, very careful to avoid seeming like they were encouraging immoral contacts, as they put it.
And they had speakers, doctors, psychiatrists.
Yes, and this is where it gets, well, complicated. These experts often presented really negative views on homosexuality. It seems paradoxical, doesn't it?
It does. But, it shows how even people fighting for change were grappling with internalized stigma. They had to figure out how to even get heard.
Right. Engaging with the medical narrative, even the negative parts, was maybe seen as a way in.
A foot in the door, maybe.
And Gittings saw the value in just breaking that silence. She said, "At first we were so grateful just to have people, anybody pay attention to us, that we listened to and accepted everything they said no matter how bad it was.
That's quite a statement.
Anything that helped to break the silence, no matter how silly or foolish it may look to us today, was important." It really shows the desperation for any kind of recognition.
And it points to that long journey of challenging internalized negativity, even within the movement itself.
On a more personal level, while she was leading the NY chapter, she was working, operating a mimeograph machine.
Okay.
And she was using the company's machine to print the DOB newsletter. Huge risk.
Definitely.
When the company found out about the content, she thought she was definitely getting fired.
I bet.
But her boss, surprisingly a woman, knew about the subject from her time in the military. She cautioned Gittings, but didn't fire her.
Wow. A small moment. But it shows maybe these little pockets of unexpected understanding could exist.
Exactly. Those individual moments of empathy, however rare, must have been crucial lifelines.
They really remind you that even in prejudiced times, individual humanity can make a difference.
Okay, so moving into the 1960s, building on that DOB work, Gittings takes on another really influential role, this time with The Ladder.
Right, the DOB's national magazine. She became editor in '63, following Lyon and Martin.
And this is where she really started seeing the potential of the press, wasn't it? To shape opinions, challenge those dominant negative narratives.
Absolutely. Lyon and Martin had wanted The Ladder to be, well, less political. But Gittings saw it as a tool for social change.
She said she discovered the power of the press, the power to put in what you want in order to influence readers. That's a key shift.
A really significant shift in approach. And her time as editor really reflected that.
How so?
Well, initially, like the early DOB meetings, The Ladder sometimes printed articles with negative viewpoints, just because getting professionals to talk about homosexuality at all was hard.
Right. Gittings mentioned hearing a speaker call exclusive homosexuals psychopaths.
But then came Frank Kameny.
Ah, Kameny, a crucial figure.
He argued forcefully, unequivocally, that homosexuality was not an illness. And that was a massive turning point for Gittings and for many others.
She said her thinking changed completely because of him. He stated homosexuality was fully on par with heterosexuality.
No sickness, no disorder, just equal.
And that realization made her look back at things, even DOB's own positions, differently. She started diverging from their more cautious path.
You really see the start of a more assertive, rights-focused approach emerging there. It's a critical evolution, moving from asking for tolerance to demanding equality.
And she put that right into The Ladder. She added a lesbian review to the cover. Bold.
Very bold for the time, a clear statement of identity.
And she replaced the old line drawings with actual photographs of lesbians, often taken by her partner, Kayla Husen.
That was radical visibility, putting real faces out there.
She also tackled more controversial stuff, tried to spark debate with articles like "I hate women" or "To act" or "To teach."
Pushing the boundaries within the community.
Yeah, and she even got the magazine into some bookstores. Actually, it sold pretty well in one place in Greenwich Village. It was all about making lesbians visible, starting conversations, reaching out.
Imagine being a woman then, reading that magazine. Seeing yourself reflected positively, maybe for the first time. It must have been incredibly powerful.
A lifeline, as you said. Offering community, validation, courage, especially those photos, real people, not just ideas.
It fostered that sense of shared identity that you weren't alone.
But Gittings didn't just stick to publications. She knew direct action was needed too. So mid-60s, she's out on the streets.
Participating in some of the very first gay picket lines in the U.S., 1965.
White House, State Department, Independence Hall in Philly, protesting the federal government's discrimination against gay employees.
Her sign. Sexual preference is irrelevant to federal employment.
Yeah.
So direct, so clear, challenging the whole basis of that discrimination.
It was incredibly brave. Just standing there, publicly identifying yourself as gay, you could lose everything. Your job, family, safety.
They were literally putting their lives and livelihoods on the line.
And that dress code for the pickets. It's fascinating. Men in suits and ties, women in dresses, heels, pantyhose.
All to look employable.
Yeah.
Fight the stereotypes by appearing as conventional as possible.
Yeah. And the public reactions were all over the place. Some people were surprised, like they all look so normal.
While others were openly hostile. Hold your noses, it's dirty here. Things like that.
One woman apparently yelled they should all be married with kids. Just shows the intense pressure and prejudice.
It really highlights that complex strategy of needing to seem normal to gain legitimacy, even while fighting for the right to be different. It's a tension you see in many movements.
Gittings admitted they were scared. Picketing wasn't common then, and their cause felt, quote, outlandish even to most gay people.
But they kept doing it.
They did. And then, remarkably, Secretary of State Dean Rusk actually mentioned the upcoming State Department picket at a press conference.
Wow, that's unexpected.
Gittings saw it as a huge breakthrough into mainstream publicity. Even if the attention wasn't all positive, getting noticed on that scale was major.
Absolutely crucial. It shattered the silence, it forced a national conversation, made the issue visible to people who might never have thought about it.
So from 65 to 69, she and Frank Kameny led these annual reminder pickets at Independence Hall every July 4th.
These were before Stonewall, remember, a really important precursor to the pride parades we know now. A shift towards public demonstration.
But her more assertive style caused friction back at DOB. She was eventually pushed out as editor of the latter in 66.
Yeah, the reasons given were varied. A late report, removing for adults only from the cover.
Suggests a real tension, doesn't it, between her more confrontational approach and the maybe more cautious old guard.
It's a common dynamic. As movements evolve, disagreements over tactics are almost inevitable. Gittings was clearly pushing for more visibility than some were ready for.
But she didn't stop. In 67, she teams up with Kameny again, this time as co-counsel at Department of Defense hearings.
Their goal was to dismantle the idea that homosexuality could be cured and challenge the firing of gay employees.
And their tactics were just brilliant, so bold.
They were, because they went right at the core justifications for discrimination. Challenging the sickness idea, demanding equal treatment, and just being there, visibly queer, wearing gay is good buttons.
Apparently, they made a point of shaking hands with everyone in the room so people had to see the buttons.
It was deliberate defiance, forcing people in power to confront LGBTQ reality.
And they succeeded in getting Dr. Charles Socarides, who claimed homosexuals could be converted, removed from the DOD's list of experts.
A huge victory. It chipped away at that harmful medicalization of homosexuality, paving the way for later changes, like declassification as a mental illness.
So, through the late 60s, Gittings is speaking everywhere. Hundreds of appearances. Her message, crystal clear. Homosexuality is not an illness, and that false idea is the biggest barrier to equality.
Yeah.
She wrote in 67, equal treatment, no more, no less, is what we want. And compassion, which many homosexuals gladly swallow because they think it represents an improvement, is not equal treatment.
That rejection of mere compassion is so insightful.
Yeah.
She knew true liberation meant full equality, not being seen as pitiable or somehow less than.
So wrapping up, Barbara Gittings' sheer bravery, being so visible and active in that deeply prejudiced time, it really laid critical groundwork.
It really did. Her work in organizations, with the latter, those incredibly risky protests, all pivotal in demanding visibility, fighting discrimination.
And her own early search for information, finding nothing positive, it resonates with anyone's desire for knowledge, for understanding. Her struggles really show how hard-won today's relative acceptance and information are.
Absolutely. Her journey reminds us how important it is to stand up, even when it's incredibly difficult.
And that shift from just trying to break the silence, even accepting negative views initially, to boldly proclaiming gay is good. That's such a powerful turning point.
It really is an aha moment in the movement's history, challenging norms, redefining identity with pride.
And by focusing on her actions, her personal journey, you can really grasp the impact one person can have. It makes history feel less overwhelming, maybe.
Definitely. Her story shows the power of persistence, courage, and just refusing to be invisible.
So, a final thought for you to consider. Gittings' bravery looked a certain way in her time. Public protests, challenging the sickness label, tearing down that shroud of invisibility. What does that kind of courage look like today?
What are the modern shrouds of invisibility that still need challenging?
Right. How can we, inspired by her example, contribute to that work in our own life, our own communities? Something to think about.
For more Queer Trip podcasts, visit the Queer Triptych at www.queertriptych.weebly.com. Have a great day and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.